I stared at the pregnancy test, two pink lines staring back at me as my hands trembled with a mixture of excitement and terror. Jack and I had been trying for 8 months, and now it was finally happening. The only problem? Telling his family. The Wilsons weren't just a family. They were an institution with traditions and expectations that felt like ancient law. And I, Emma Wilson, formerly Emma Chen, was still very much an outsider after 3 years of marriage. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Honey, are you okay in there? Jack's voice came through the bathroom door, gentle but tinged with concern. I'm pregnant, I blurted out as I swung the door open, tears already streaming down my face. Jack's expression transformed from worry to pure joy as he wrapped me in his arms, lifting me off the ground in a spinning hug that made me laugh despite my anxiety. We're having a baby, he shouted, his eyes bright with tears. We have to tell my parents. And just like that, my joy was tempered by dread. Patricia Wilson, my mother-in-law, had been not so subtly hinting about grandchildren since our wedding day. This news would give her more reason than ever to insert herself into our lives. 2 days later, we sat in the grand dining room of the Wilson family home, a colonial-style mansion that had been in Jack's family for 3 generations. The table was immaculately set, as always, with the fine china that Patricia only brought out for special occasions. Tonight was certainly special, though I doubted my news would be received with the pure joy I'd hoped for. Emma, you've barely touched your salmon. Is something wrong with it? Patricia's voice cut through my thoughts, her perfectly manicured, eyebrow raised in that way that always made me feel like I was being graded. No, it's delicious, I said quickly, taking a bite to appease her. Jack and I actually have some news to share. Jack reached for my hand under the table, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Mom, Dad, Vanessa. Emma and I are expecting a baby. The silence lasted only a moment before the room erupted. Robert, my father-in-law, stood up to clap Jack on the shoulder with genuine delight. Vanessa, Jack's younger sister, squealed with excitement. But Patricia's reaction was more measured, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Well, isn't that wonderful, she said, setting down her fork with precision. A Wilson heir at last. When are you due, dear? Early February, I replied, trying to match her composure. A winter baby, she mused. Robert's mother was born in winter. Elizabeth. A beautiful name with such history in our family. And there it was, the first hint of what would become an unrelenting campaign. We haven't really discussed names yet, Jack interjected, seemingly oblivious to his mother's implication. Well, there's plenty of time for that, Robert said jovially. Tonight, we celebrate. As Robert poured champagne for everyone, sparkling water for me, Patricia leaned close. You know, Emma, in the Wilson family, we have a tradition of honoring our ancestors through names. Robert's father was William and his father before him. If it's a boy, William Robert would be the natural choice. I nodded politely, but inside I was already preparing for battle. Jack and I had always talked about choosing unique names that meant something to both of us. I'd imagined us deliberating together, making lists, feeling the freedom to create our child's identity together. Now I realized that freedom might be an illusion. In the weeks that followed, my pregnancy became public knowledge, and with it came an avalanche of advice, suggestions, and thinly veiled demands from the Wilson clan. Patricia had taken to texting me daily links to articles about family naming traditions and the psychological importance of cultural continuity. Your mother sent me another text about baby names, I told Jack one evening as we sat on our couch, my feet in his lap as he massaged them, a new ritual since my ankles had started swelling. She's just excited, Jack said with a shrug. You know how she gets. Jack, she's not just suggesting names. She's planning our child's entire identity before we've even had our first ultrasound. He sighed, his hands pausing on my feet. What do you want me to say to her? That we'll name our baby whatever we decide together. That it's our child, not a Wilson legacy project. Jack's expression tightened. It was the same look he always got when caught between me and his family, particularly his mother. Let's just wait until we know if it's a boy or girl. Maybe it won't even be an issue. But I knew better. With Patricia Wilson, everything was an issue when it came to family tradition. The first ultrasound should have been a magical moment between Jack and me. Instead, Patricia insisted on coming along, claiming it was a Wilson tradition for grandmothers to be present at the first viewing. I hadn't had the heart or energy to fight her on it, especially when Jack seemed to think it was perfectly normal. As the cool gel spread across my still flat stomach and the technician moved the wand around, Patricia hovered behind her, eyes fixed on the screen with laser focus. There, the technician said with a smile, pointing to a tiny fluttering spot. That's your baby's heartbeat. Tears sprang to my eyes as I reached for Jack's hand. He was transfixed, his expression one of wonder. Can you tell if it's a boy or girl? Patricia asked immediately. The technician shook her head. It's far too early for that. You'll need to wait until around week 20 for that information. Patricia nodded, already pulling out her phone. We should schedule the gender reveal party now. The Wilson room at the Garden Terrace books up months in advance. I exchanged a glance with Jack, hoping he would intervene, but he just smiled. Mom's been planning this since we got married, he whispered. Just let her have this. One. As if it were a single concession and not part of a pattern that had defined our entire relationship with his family. Later that day, I met my best friend Sophia at Morning Brew, our favorite coffee shop. Unlike Jack, Sophia understood my frustration without me having to explain it. She's already planning a gender reveal party? Sophia asked, eyes wide as she sipped her latte. Without asking if you even want one? I nodded, wrapping my hands around my decaf cappuccino. And you should hear her go on about names. If it's a boy, it has to be William Robert. If it's a girl, Elizabeth Patricia. And what does Jack say about all this? I sighed, looking down at my drink. He says we should wait and see, that it doesn't matter right now. But it does matter, Sophia said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. This is your baby too, Emma. Your family, your decisions. I know, I replied, my voice small. But the Wilsons are so overwhelming. Sometimes it's easier to just go along with them than to fight every battle. And how's that working out for you? Sophia asked gently. The question hung between us, unanswered, because we both knew the truth. It wasn't working. I was disappearing bit by bit, my identity absorbed into the Wilson family machine. As the weeks passed, my body changed, and so did the dynamics in our family. Patricia took every opportunity to remind everyone that this baby would be the next generation of the Wilson legacy. She spoke of family traditions as if they were constitutional amendments, immutable and sacred. At 16 weeks, we had another ultrasound. This time, Jack and I went alone, a small victory I'd fought hard for. Would you like to know the sex? Dr. Chen asked, her kind eyes looking between us. Jack and I had discussed this extensively. Not today, I said firmly. We're waiting for the reveal party. It was a compromise I'd made with Patricia, agreeing to her elaborate party on the condition that neither of us would know beforehand. Dr. Chen nodded, typing something into her computer. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I'll put the information in a sealed envelope for you to give to whoever is planning your reveal. As we left the appointment, Jack looked at the envelope with curiosity. "Aren't you even a little tempted to peek?" I laughed, tucking the envelope safely in my purse. "Of course I am, but your mother would somehow know, and I'd never hear the end of it." Jack slung his arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. "Thank you for going along with all this. I know it's not exactly what you had in mind." I leaned into him, wanting to savor this moment of connection. "The important thing is that our baby is healthy. Everything else is negotiable." Even as I said it, I wondered if I was trying to convince Jack or myself. The gender reveal. Party was scheduled for the following weekend at the Garden Terrace, an upscale venue that the Wilsons frequented for their various social events. Patricia had taken full control of the planning, consulting me only on the most superficial details. "Blue or pink decorations?" she'd asked during one of our mandatory lunch meetings. "Actually, I was thinking maybe green and yellow? Something more neutral," I'd suggested. Patricia had smiled that tight smile of hers. "But then, how will people know what we're celebrating? Blue and pink are traditional for a reason, Emma." Traditional. That word again. The Wilson family. Shield against any form of change or individuality. The day before the party, Jack came home with a strange expression on his face. "Everything okay?" I asked, looking up from my laptop where I'd been working on a marketing analysis for Clearview. He sat beside me, his movements oddly stiff. "I had lunch with my mom today," he began. I closed my laptop, already sensing this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. "She's really adamant about the naming tradition," he continued. "Dad's getting involved now, too. They've been talking about setting up a trust fund for the baby that would be, well, contingent on us following family traditions, including the name." "Contingent," I repeated, my voice rising. "They're trying to bribe us into naming our child after them?" Jack winced. "They don't see it that way. To them, it's about preserving history, honoring the past." "It's about control, Jack," I said, standing up as anger surged through me. "And you know what's worse? You're letting them do this. You're standing there telling me about their financial manipulation, like it's a weather report." "Emma, calm down. Stress isn't good for the baby. Don't you dare." I cut him off. "Don't use our baby as an excuse to avoid this conversation." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd come to know well. "What do you want me to do? Tell my parents to take their traditions and shove them? They're my family, Emma." "And what am I?" The question came out quieter than I'd intended, laden with all the insecurity and alienation I'd felt since becoming a Wilson. Jack's expression softened as he stood to take my hands. "You're my wife, the mother of my child. You're everything to me." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But as I looked into his eyes, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd ever truly come first in his life. The morning of the gender reveal party dawned bright and clear, a perfect late summer day. I stood in front of our bedroom mirror, smoothing down the dress Patricia had suggested I wear. A flowing maxi dress in a pale neutral tone that she claimed would look lovely with either blue or pink accessories once we know. "You look beautiful," Jack said, coming up behind me to wrap his arms around my growing belly. I leaned back against him, seeking comfort. "I just want to get through today." He kissed the top of my head. "It'll be fine. Mom's gone all out to make this special." That was precisely what worried me. The garden terrace was transformed when we arrived. Patricia had indeed gone all out with elaborate decorations, a professional photographer, a custom cake, and what looked like half of Riverside's upper social circle in attendance. "Emma, darling," Patricia trilled as we entered, air-kissing my cheeks. "You look wonderful. Pregnancy agrees with you." Before I could respond, she was whisking me around the room, introducing me to distant Wilson relatives and her social club friends, all of whom seemed to have strong opinions about my pregnancy. "Make sure you're getting enough fish oil," advised Eleanor Jenkins, Patricia's bridge partner. "My grandson is brilliant because my daughter-in-law took omega-3s all through her pregnancy." "You're carrying high. Definitely a boy," declared an elderly great-aunt I'd never met before. "The Wilson men are always strong babies. Be prepared for a 9-pounder," warned another relative with a laugh that made my insides clench with anxiety. By the time we got to the main event, I was exhausted and overwhelmed. Everyone gathered around the elaborate setup Patricia had arranged, a large black balloon that would be popped to release either blue or pink confetti. "Before we begin," Patricia announced, commanding the room's attention with practiced ease, "Robert and I have a little presentation." My stomach dropped as Robert wheeled in what looked like a family tree mounted on a display board. "For those who may not be familiar with our family history," Patricia continued, "the Wilson name has been carried with pride for generations. William Wilson, Robert's father, was a founding member of Riverside's City Council. His father, William Sr., established the first bank in the county." As she went on, I felt Jack's hand find mine, squeezing gently. Whether in support or as a warning to stay calm, I wasn't sure. Today, as we prepare to welcome the newest Wilson, we wanted to highlight the importance of family continuity, Patricia said, her gaze finding me in the crowd. "Which is why Robert and I are so pleased that Emma and Jack have agreed to honor our family tradition of naming." My head snapped toward Jack, who looked as surprised as I felt. We had agreed to no such thing. "If it's a boy, he will be William Robert Wilson, continuing the proud legacy of Wilson men," Patricia declared. "And if we're blessed with a little girl, she will be Elizabeth Patricia, after Robert's grandmother and myself." The room erupted in approving murmurs and applause. I stood frozen, humiliation and rage battling within me as Patricia beamed at the crowd. "Jack," I hissed, "did you tell them we agreed to this?" He shook his head slightly, his expression pained. "I'll fix it," he whispered back. "Just not right now. Let's just find out the gender first." Before I could argue, Dr. Chen was being called forward with the sealed envelope containing our baby's gender information. She'd agreed to attend as a favor to me, not knowing what she was walking into. "Ready for the big moment?" she asked, smiling as she handed the envelope to Laura Anderson, the family friend Patricia had designated to fill the balloon. Laura took the envelope and stepped behind a decorative screen where the balloon was hidden from view. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited. Patricia stood close to Jack and me, her hand proprietarily on my shoulder. "I just know it's going to be a boy," she whispered, "a strong Wilson son." Finally, Laura emerged with the large black balloon, a secretive smile on her face. "It's ready," she announced. Jack and I were positioned in front of the balloon, a large pin in hand. The photographer directed us to pose, smiling and looking excited. I forced my face into what I hoped resembled happiness rather than the simmering anger I actually felt. "On the count of 3, Robert called out. 1, 2, 3. Jack and I pushed the pin into the balloon together. It popped with a loud bang, and confetti rained down around us. Pink confetti. A girl. The crowd erupted in cheers and congratulations. Jack wrapped me in a hug, genuine joy on his face. "A daughter," he whispered against my hair. "We're having a little girl." I felt a surge of love and protectiveness. Our daughter. Not a Wilson heir, but our child. In that moment, my resolve strengthened. I would not let her become a pawn in Patricia's legacy games. Patricia's reaction was more subdued than I'd expected. She hugged us both, her smile tight, but present. "Elizabeth Patricia," she said, as if confirming an order. "She'll be beautiful." I opened my mouth to contradict her, but the moment was interrupted by Dr. Chen approaching us, a strange expression on her face. "Emma, Jack," she said quietly. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Patricia frowned. "Is something wrong with the baby?" Dr. Chen's professional demeanor didn't waver. "Nothing to worry about. Just a quick question about Emma's next appointment." Reluctantly, Patricia stepped away, drawn into conversation with some of her friends. Dr. Chen led us to a quiet corner of the terrace. "I apologize for the interruption," she began, her voice low. "But there's something you should know." My heart rate quickened. "Is there a problem with the baby?" Dr. Chen shook her head. "Not with the baby, no. But when I was reviewing your file this morning, I noticed something unusual in the genetic screening results we did at 12 weeks. Jack's hand tightened around mine. "What kind of unusual?" "The DNA analysis shows patterns that are inconsistent with what we would expect given the family medical history you provided, Jack." I looked between Dr. Chen and my husband, confusion mounting. "What does that mean exactly?" Dr. Chen took a deep breath. "Based on the genetic markers we can identify, there appears to be no biological connection between Jack and the baby." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "That's impossible," I whispered, clutching Jack's arm for support. "There must be some mistake," Jack said, his voice hollow. "I ran the analysis twice," Dr. Chen replied gently. "I wouldn't have brought it up otherwise, especially not today. But given the emphasis on family lineage I've been hearing, I felt you needed to know privately before things went any further." As the implications of her words sank in, I felt the ground giving way beneath me. A baby that wasn't Jack's? It wasn't possible. We'd been trying for 8 months, and I had would never. But the test results didn't lie, and suddenly, the pink confetti seemed like the least of our revelations today. The drive home from the garden terrace was silent, the weight of Dr. Chen's revelation pressing down on us like a physical force. Jack gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white, while I stared out the window, watching Riverside's familiar landscape blur past without really seeing it. The pink gift bags filled with baby girl items sat untouched, in the back seat, mockingly cheerful against the tension filling the car. "It has to be a mistake," I finally said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "Lab errors happen all the time." Jack nodded stiffly but didn't look at me. "We'll get another test, a different lab." "I've never," I began, then stopped, the words catching in my throat. How could I even begin to defend myself against an accusation that hadn't been explicitly made but hung between us nevertheless? "I know," Jack said quickly, but the slight hesitation before his response felt like a knife twisting in my chest.
Something stood awkwardly, stranger.
In my own home. "Should we talk about this?" I asked tentatively. Jack took a long swallow of his drink before answering. "What is there to talk about? The test is wrong. We'll prove it's wrong. And if it's not?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. He looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time since Dr. Chen had pulled us aside. The hurt and confusion in his eyes made me want to disappear. "Then I don't know who you are anymore, Emma." I sank onto the couch, protective hands moving instinctively to my stomach where my daughter, was growing. "I haven't been with anyone else, Jack. Not ever. You have to believe me." "I want to," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "God, Emma, I want to." My phone buzzed with an incoming call, Patricia's name flashing on the screen. I silenced it immediately, but the interruption hung between us. She's going to keep calling, Jack said flatly. She wants to talk about nursery colors and monogrammed baby clothes for Elizabeth Patricia. The name that had been a point of contention now seemed trivial compared to the chasm that had opened between us. What are we going to tell your family? Jack finished his whiskey in one swift motion. Nothing. Not until we know something for sure. That night, we slept on opposite sides of the bed, the distance between us more than physical. I lay awake for hours, replaying the last year of our life together, trying to make sense of something that seemed scientifically impossible. Jack and I had been trying to conceive for 8 months before the positive test. There had been no one else. There couldn't have been. The next morning, I woke to find Jack already up, his laptop open at the kitchen table. "I've been researching DNA tests," he said without preamble. "There's a clinic downtown that can do a paternity test while you're still pregnant. I made an appointment for this afternoon." I nodded, grateful for the plan of action, even as anxiety churned in my stomach. "Thank you." His expression softened slightly. "I called in sick to work. You should do the same." I sent a quick email to my team at Clearview, claiming a migraine, then made myself a cup of ginger tea to settle my queasy stomach. Whether from morning sickness or stress, I couldn't tell anymore. "Your mother called 3 more times last night," I said, glancing at my phone, "and texted this morning about looking through family photo albums to see which Wilson women the baby might resemble." Jack ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing, but now seemed like a nervous tic. "I'll handle my mother. Just not yet." The hours before our appointment crawled by. Jack retreated to his home office, allegedly to catch up on work emails, but more likely to avoid conversation. I tried to distract myself with a book, but found myself reading the same paragraph repeatedly without comprehension. At 3:30, we sat in the sterile waiting room of Riverside Genetic Solutions, surrounded by other expectant parents who looked far happier than we felt. The receptionist had given us a stack of paperwork to fill out, most of which Jack took charge of while I flipped absently through a parenting magazine. "Wilson?" a technician called, looking up from her clipboard. We followed her down a hallway, lined with smiling baby photos, an unfortunate decoration choice for a paternity testing facility, I thought grimly. The procedure was straightforward but uncomfortable. A needle inserted into my abdomen to collect amniotic fluid, while an ultrasound guided the placement. Jack stood beside me, holding my hand mechanically, his eyes fixed on the ultrasound screen showing our baby girl. "Will this hurt the baby?" I asked the technician, wincing as the needle went in. "There's a very small risk of complications," she explained, her voice professionally detached. "But it's generally considered safe." When it was over, the technician explained that they would need a cheek swab from Jack to compare against the baby's DNA. As she scraped the inside of his cheek, I saw something vulnerable in his expression that broke my heart all over again. "How long for results?" Jack asked. "Typically 3 to 5 business days," she replied. "But since you've paid for expedited processing, you should hear back within 48 hours. 2 days. 2 days of limbo, of unanswered questions and growing suspicion. As we left the clinic, Jack's phone rang. His mother again. This time he answered. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "No, everything's fine. Just a busy day. Yes, Emma's doing well." He glanced at me, something unreadable in his expression. "Listen, we're going to need some time to ourselves this week." "No, nothing's wrong. We just need some space to process everything. I know you're excited about the nursery, but it can wait." "Yes, I'll call you soon. Love you too." He hung up with a sigh. "That should buy us a couple of days." "Thank you," I said softly. He nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "Let's go home." The next 48 hours were among the most excruciating of my life. Jack and I moved around each other like wary strangers, careful to maintain physical distance. He slept in the guest room, claiming he didn't want to disturb me with his restless tossing and turning, but we both knew the real reason. I tried to work from home, staring at marketing reports that might as well have been written in hieroglyphics for all I could comprehend them. Jack disappeared for long stretches, claiming to be running errands or working at a coffee shop where he could concentrate better. I didn't challenge him, even when he came home smelling faintly of beer one evening. Patricia continued her campaign of texts and calls, undeterred by Jack's request for space. I let them go to voicemail, unable to face her enthusiasm about a grandchild that might not be her son's. Finally, on Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Mrs. Wilson, this is Dr. Patel from Riverside Genetic Solutions. We have your results ready." My heart hammered in my chest. "Can you tell me now? Over the phone?" "We generally prefer to discuss results in person," she said carefully. "Would you and your husband be able to come in tomorrow morning?" "Please," I begged, tears threatening. "I need to know now." There was a pause. Then Dr. Patel's voice softened. "The results show with 99.9% certainty that Mr. Wilson is not the biological father of your child." Even though I'd been expecting it, the confirmation hit me like a physical blow. I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "Mrs. Wilson, are you all right?" "There has to be a mistake," I whispered. "We've been trying for 8 months. I haven't been with anyone else. It's not possible." "I understand this is difficult news," Dr. Patel said gently. "But the DNA analysis is quite definitive. Perhaps you could come in tomorrow with your husband and we can discuss some possible explanations?" I agreed numbly, writing down the appointment time she offered. When I hung up, I sat in the silent house, trying to make sense of the impossible. I hadn't been unfaithful. I knew that with absolute certainty. But science was saying otherwise, and science didn't lie. Did it? I was still sitting there when Jack came home an hour later, his face instantly alert when he saw my expression. "They called?" he asked, setting down his keys. I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. "And?" The single word contained volumes of fear. "It's confirmed," I said, my voice barely audible. "You're not. The test says you're not the father." Jack stood frozen for a long moment, then walked to the kitchen cabinet where we kept the liquor. This time he didn't bother with a glass, taking a swig directly from the whiskey bottle. "Jack," I began, standing to follow him. "Please believe me. I haven't—" "Stop," he cut me off, his voice hard. "Just stop, Emma. The test doesn't lie." But I'm not lying either," I cried, desperation making my voice rise. "I've never been with anyone else since we met. How can both things be true?" He slammed the bottle down on the counter. "Well, one of you is lying, either you or the test, and tests don't have a reason to lie." The accusation hung in the air between us, ugly and irrevocable. I felt something break inside me, the last remnant of hope that we could salvage this. "They want us to come in tomorrow," I said quietly, "to discuss possible explanations." Jack laughed, a bitter sound devoid of humor. "What explanations? Immaculate conception?" "There could be medical reasons," I insisted. "Mix-ups at the lab or something we haven't thought of." He looked at me then, his eyes red-rimmed and empty. "I'm going to stay at Daniel's tonight. I need space to think." "Jack, please." "I'll pick you up for the appointment tomorrow," he interrupted. 2:00, right?" I nodded mutely, watching, as he grabbed a few essentials and stuffed them into a gym bag. He paused at the door, not looking back. "I never thought you could do this to us, Emma." Then he was gone, the door closing with a quiet click that somehow hurt more than a slam would have. Alone in our suddenly too large house, I curled up on the couch and finally allowed myself to break down completely. I cried until there were no tears left, until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. When exhaustion finally claimed me, I dreamed of babies with no faces and DNA strands that twisted into accusatory fingers. The next morning, I woke stiff and disoriented on the couch. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Patricia and 1 text from Jack. "I'll pick you up at 1:30. I showered and dressed mechanically, choosing comfortable clothes without much thought. As I was making toast I had no appetite for, my phone rang again, Sophia this time. "Hey stranger," she said when I answered. "How was the gender reveal? I've been waiting for details." I hesitated, then found myself spilling everything. The pink confetti, Dr. Chen's bombshell, the confirmatory test, Jack leaving. By the end, I was crying again, and Sophia was making soothing noises through the phone. "Emma, honey, listen to me," she said firmly. "If you say you haven't been with anyone else, then there has to be another explanation. Don't let Jack or his family or some lab test make you doubt yourself." "But what other explanation could there be?" I asked, wiping my eyes. "I don't know. But that's what doctors are for." "Do you want me to come with you to the appointment today? For moral support?" I considered it briefly, then declined. "Jack's picking me up. I think this needs to be just us right now." "Okay. But call me right after. And Emma? Whatever happens, I believe you." Her words were a balm to my battered spirit, a reminder that not everyone in my life saw me as a liar and a cheat. Jack arrived precisely at 1:30, looking as though he hadn't slept any better than I had. The drive to the clinic was silent, the radio turned up just enough to prevent conversation. Dr. Patel was a small woman with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. She greeted us in her office rather than an exam room, gesturing for us to sit in the comfortable chairs across from her desk. "Thank you for coming in," she began. "I know this is a difficult situation, and I want to assure you that we take these matters very seriously." Jack nodded stiffly. "So there's no doubt about the results?" "The DNA analysis was performed twice to verify accuracy," Dr. Patel confirmed. "The genetic markers clearly indicate that there is no paternal match between you, Mr. Wilson, and the fetus." I flinched at the clinical terminology, fetus instead of baby, as if our daughter had been reduced to a scientific specimen. "But I need you both to understand something," Dr. Patel continued. "While DNA testing is highly accurate, the interpretation of results requires context, and there are some rare medical phenomena that can complicate paternity testing." For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. "What kind of phenomena?" "Well, one possibility, though I should stress it's extremely rare, is a condition called chimerism." Jack frowned. "What's that?" "Chimerism occurs when one person carries 2 different sets of DNA, Dr. Patel explained. It typically happens when fraternal twins fuse very early in development, resulting in one person with 2 distinct genetic profiles. I leaned forward, hardly daring to breathe. "Are you saying I could have 2 different sets of DNA?" "It's possible, though unlikely," Dr. Patel said cautiously. "A more common scenario would be if Mr. Wilson were the chimera. In that case, the DNA in his cheek cells, which we tested, might be different from the DNA in his sperm cells." Jack's expression shifted from skepticism to confusion. "So I could be the father, but the test wouldn't show it?" "Exactly." Dr. Patel nodded. "Again, I must emphasize this is extremely rare, but given Mrs. Wilson's certainty about fidelity, it's a possibility worth exploring." "How would we know for sure?" I asked, hope growing despite my efforts to contain it. "We would need to test different tissue samples from Mr. Wilson. Blood, hair follicles, possibly even a testicular biopsy for the most definitive answer." Jack winced at the last suggestion, but I could see the doubt in his expression giving way to consideration. "There are other possibilities as well," Dr. Patel continued. "Bone marrow transplants can alter DNA profiles. Certain fertility treatments can complicate paternity, even lab errors, though our quality control processes make that highly unlikely. I've never had a transplant, Jack said slowly, and we didn't use fertility treatments. I felt a weight lift slightly from my shoulders. For the first time in days, there was an explanation that didn't involve me betraying our marriage. I'd like to be tested for this. Chimerism, Jack said finally. Dr. Patel nodded. We can begin with blood and hair samples today, if you're willing. The results will take longer than the paternity test. At least a week, possibly more. Another week of uncertainty, but with a glimmer of hope now. I looked at Jack, searching his face for any sign that he believed in my innocence. If this is true, he said slowly, if I'm the chimera, then the baby is mine after all? Genetically, yes, Dr. Patel confirmed. Though again, I must caution that chimerism is quite rare. Jack nodded, then turned to me. For the first time in days, his expression wasn't accusatory. Let's do the tests. We left the clinic an hour later, Jack's arm bearing a bandage from the blood draw, a small patch of hair missing from the back of his head where they'd taken follicle samples. The silence between us in the car was different now, less hostile, more contemplative. I'm going back to Daniel's for now, Jack said as we pulled into our driveway. Until we have the results. I nodded, disappointment mixing with understanding. Will you tell him what's going on? Jack hesitated. Not yet, not until we know for sure. What about your mother? She's been calling non-stop. A shadow crossed his face. I'll tell her we're having some issues with the pregnancy that we want to keep private for now. That should keep her at bay for a while. I almost smiled at that. The first time Jack had ever suggested keeping his mother at bay. As I got out of the car, Jack rolled down his window. Emma? I turned, hope rising despite myself. I want to believe you, he said simply. I'm trying to. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was a start. Thank you, I whispered. That night, for the first time since the gender reveal, I slept in our bed without crying myself to exhaustion first. The following days settled into a strange new routine. Jack stayed at Daniel's, but called daily to check on me and the baby. He accompanied me to my regular prenatal appointment, sitting awkwardly in the waiting room but present nonetheless. We didn't discuss names or nursery colors or any of the happy preparations we should have been making. Instead, we existed in a holding pattern, waiting for science to either vindicate or condemn our marriage. Patricia, predictably, refused to be sidelined for long. She showed up at our house unannounced 5 days after Jack moved out, her expression a masterful blend of concern and suspicion. Emma, darling, what's going on? She demanded as soon as I opened the door. Jack's been dodging my calls, and you've been positively ghost-like. I considered lying, but exhaustion won out. Jack and I are working through some issues, Patricia. We need space right now. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of issues? Is it about the baby? I can't discuss it, I said firmly. It's between Jack and me. She stepped past me into the house, uninvited. He's staying with Daniel. Did you know that? A man doesn't leave his pregnant wife without serious cause. The implication hung in the air, and I felt a surge of anger. What exactly are you suggesting, Patricia? She set her purse down on our coffee table, claiming territory. I'm not suggesting anything, dear. I'm simply concerned. This family has certain expectations, certain standards. Jack has always upheld those. Unlike me, you mean? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Patricia smiled thinly. You said it, not I. Now why don't you tell me what's really going on? Mother to mother, so to speak. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that antagonizing Patricia would only make things worse. As I said, it's between Jack and me. When we're ready to share more, we will. If you've done something to hurt my son, I haven't, I cut her off, my patience finally snapping. And I think you should leave now, Patricia. Jack will call you when he's ready. She looked momentarily taken aback by my directness. Then her expression hardened. Very well. But remember, Emma, the Wilson family has weathered many storms over generations. Whatever this situation is, the family will endure. After she left, I called Jack immediately. Your mother just ambushed me at the house. He sighed heavily. I'm sorry. What did she say? Basically implied that I've done something terrible, and the mighty Wilson family will survive whatever scandal I've created. I'll talk to her, Jack promised. Make it clear that she needs to back off. I almost laughed at the unlikelihood of Patricia Wilson ever backing off from anything. Have you heard anything from Dr. Patel? Not yet, he replied. She said a week minimum. We lapsed into silence, the weight of our situation pressing down despite the physical distance between us. I miss you, I said finally, the words escaping before I could reconsider. There was a long pause, and I thought he might not respond. Then quietly, I miss you too, Em. It wasn't much, but it was something to hold on to as another day of uncertainty ended. The call from Dr. Patel came exactly 9 days after our appointment. I was at work, trying to focus on a presentation for a new client, when my phone lit up with the clinic's number. Mrs. Wilson? This is Dr. Patel. I have some preliminary results from your husband's tests. Is it possible for both of you to come in this afternoon? My heart raced. Yes, of course. What did you find? I'd prefer to discuss it in person, she said, her professional tone giving nothing away. How does 4 o'clock work for you? I texted Jack immediately. Dr. Patel called. Results are in. Appointment at 4. His response came within seconds. I'll pick you up at 3:30. The hours crawled by, each minute stretching impossibly as I tried to maintain the appearance of a functioning professional while my entire future hung in the balance. By the time Jack's car pulled up outside Clearview's offices, I was a bundle of raw nerves. He looked as tense as I felt, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Any idea what she found? I shook my head. She wouldn't say over the phone. We drove in silence, both too afraid to voice our hopes or fears. When we arrived at the clinic, Dr. Patel was waiting for us, her expression carefully neutral as she led us back to her office. Thank you for coming in, she began once we were seated. As I mentioned on the phone, we have some preliminary results from Mr. Wilson's additional testing. And? Jack prompted, his voice strained. Dr. Patel folded her hands on her desk. The analysis of your blood cells showed something quite interesting. There appears to be a small but significant population of cells with a different genetic profile than those in your cheek swab. I held my breath, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. Are you saying I'm a chimera? Jack asked, disbelief evident in his tone. The evidence strongly suggests it. Yes, Dr. Patel nodded. To be absolutely certain, we would need more extensive testing, possibly including that testicular biopsy we discussed. But these preliminary results are consistent with chimerism. I felt tears welling in my eyes, tears of relief, of vindication. So the baby could very well be Mr. Wilson's biological child, Dr. Patel finished for me. The DNA in his reproductive cells may match the paternal DNA we found in the amniotic fluid sample. Jack seemed stunned, processing the information, with a slightly dazed expression. How common is this? Quite rare, Dr. Patel admitted. Chimerism often goes undetected unless it causes medical issues, or, as in your case, unexpected genetic test results. You might have gone your entire life never knowing you carry 2 distinct DNA profiles. So I've been wrong, Jack said, slowly, turning to look at me. All this time, I thought. I reached for his hand, not caring if he pulled away. you had reason to doubt. The test said, "No," he interrupted, gripping my hand tightly. "I should have trusted you. Known you would never." Dr. Patel tactfully looked down at her papers, giving us a moment of privacy. "I'll need to run more tests to confirm beyond any doubt, but given the circumstances, I'm reasonably confident that Mr. Wilson is indeed the father of your child." When we left the clinic, the world seemed somehow brighter, as if a fog had lifted. Jack stood beside the car, keys in hand, looking at me with an expression of such profound regret that it made my heart ache. "Emma, I don't know how to even begin to apologize." I stepped closer to him, placing my hand on his cheek. "You were going by the evidence you had. Anyone would have doubted." "No," he said firmly. "Not everyone would have. I should have trusted you, trusted us. Instead, I moved out. Let you face this alone." "We're facing it together now," I reminded. "Him. That's what matters." He pulled me into his arms then, holding me as if afraid I might disappear. "Can you forgive me?" I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. A heart that contained, apparently, 2 different genetic blueprints. "Yes, but can we go home now? Really home, with both of us there?" Jack's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Home sounds perfect." As we drove back to our house, our home, I felt our daughter kick, a strong, decisive movement as if adding her approval to the reconciliation. Jack's hand found mine across the console, squeezing gently. There was still healing to be done, trust to be rebuilt, but we had taken the first step. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized we hadn't yet discussed what to name our daughter. Somehow I doubted Elizabeth Patricia would still be on the table. The warm glow of reconciliation lasted until we pulled into our driveway and saw Patricia's Mercedes parked at the curb. Jack tensed beside me, his hand tightening around mine. "I forgot to call her," he muttered. After Dr. Patel's news, it completely slipped my mind. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Do you want to talk to her alone?" Jack shook his head. "No. We face this together now, but let me take the lead, okay?" Patricia emerged from her car as we parked, her expression a carefully constructed mask of maternal concern. "Jack, Emma, I've been trying to reach you both for hours." "We had a doctor's appointment, Mom," Jack said as we approached. "I was planning to call you afterward." "Is everything all right with the baby?" Patricia's gaze darted to my stomach, the protectiveness in her expression genuine despite everything. Jack glanced at me, a silent question in his eyes. I nodded slightly, a subtle permission to share our news. "Can we go inside first?" he suggested. "It's a complicated situation." Once settled in our living room, Patricia perched on the edge of an armchair, while Jack and I sat together on the couch, a united front. I could see her cataloging the change in our dynamic, the way Jack's arm rested protectively around my shoulders. "So," she began, impatience evident in her tone, "what's this complicated situation that's kept you both so mysteriously occupied?" Jack took a deep breath. "After the gender reveal, we received some surprising news from Emma's doctor. A routine. Genetic screening suggested that I might not be the baby's biological father." Patricia's face went blank with shock, then rapidly cycled through disbelief, outrage, and a flash of something like vindication before settling on stern disapproval. "I see," she said, her voice brittle. "And what explanation has Emma offered for this? Development?" The emphasis she placed on my name made it clear where her suspicions lay. Before Jack could respond, I straightened my spine and met her gaze directly. "I've never been unfaithful to Jack," I said firmly. "Not once, ever." Patricia's eyebrow arched in disbelief. "Then perhaps you'd care to explain how—" "Mom," Jack interrupted, his voice carrying a warning note I'd never heard him use with her before. We've just come from a specialist who confirmed that I have a medical condition called chimerism. Do you know what that is? Patricia blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Can't say that I do. It means I carry 2 different sets of DNA, Jack explained. The DNA in my cheek cells, which is what was tested initially, doesn't match the DNA in other parts of my body, potentially including my reproductive cells. That sounds rather convenient, Patricia said, skepticism evident in her tone. I felt Jack stiffen beside me but was surprised when he let out a short, humorless laugh. Actually, Mom, it's incredibly inconvenient. It caused us 2 weeks of hell, nearly broke our marriage and subjected Emma to false accusations and suspicion. So, no, I wouldn't call it convenient at all. Patricia seemed taken aback by his directness. I'm simply saying it sounds unusual, medically speaking. It is unusual, I agreed. But it's real, and it explains everything. The doctor has confirmed it with preliminary tests. Patricia's gaze shifted between us, calculating. I could almost see her reassessing the situation, adjusting her approach accordingly. Well, she said finally, I'm relieved to hear there's a medical explanation. Family is everything to the Wilsons, as you know. The thought of our bloodline being compromised would be difficult to accept. The chill in her words made me instinctively place my hands over my belly, as if to shield our daughter from her grandmother's conditional love. Mom, Jack said, his voice low and serious. I need to be very clear about something. Whether or not this baby shares Wilson DNA, which, as it happens, she does, she is our daughter. Emma is my wife. They are my family, and I expect you to treat them with respect. I glanced at him in surprise. In all our years together, I'd never heard Jack speak to his mother with such authority, such unwavering conviction. Patricia looked equally startled but recovered quickly. Of course, Jack. I meant no disrespect to Emma. She turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I hope you can forgive an old woman's concern for her son. These past weeks must have been terribly difficult for you both. Her non-apology hung in the air, neither fully accepted nor rejected. Instead, I changed the subject. We're going to need some time to reconnect and prepare for the baby. The nursery planning and other details can wait a bit longer. But there's only 4 months until your due date, Patricia protested, and we still haven't settled on the name. Elizabeth. Patricia would be… Actually, Jack interrupted, we've decided not to use family names after all. The words hit Patricia like a physical blow. What? But the tradition? We're starting our own traditions, Jack said firmly. It's important to us that our daughter have her own identity, not one predetermined by family history. I held my breath, hardly believing what I was hearing. We hadn't discussed names at all since the gender reveal, and here was Jack not only standing up to his mother, but actively rejecting the Wilson naming tradition. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. I see. And have you decided on this new, non-traditional name? Jack looked at me, a gentle question in his eyes. I realized he was giving me the opening to claim this territory as my own. We're still considering options, I said, careful to keep my tone neutral. We'll let you know when we decide. Patricia stood abruptly, smoothing her already immaculate slacks. Well, I should let you two reconnect, as Emma put it. We can discuss the nursery details another time. Jack walked her to the door while I remained on the couch, emotionally drained from the confrontation. I could hear their muffled conversation in the entryway, but couldn't make out the words. When Jack returned, his expression was a mix of exhaustion and something like pride. That went better than expected, he said, dropping back onto the couch beside me. I raised an eyebrow. Did it? I'm pretty sure your mother is already planning how to change our minds about the name. Jack smiled, taking my hand. Probably. But she'll have to get through me first, and I'm done letting her dictate our choices. Where did that come from? I asked, genuinely curious. The Jack I know has never stood up to Patricia like that. He was quiet for a moment, considering. When I believed you might have been unfaithful, it broke something in me. Then when Dr. Patel explained about the chimerism, and I realized you'd been telling the truth all along, that I'd doubted you for no reason, it was like seeing everything clearly for the first time. Including your mother's influence over us. Jack nodded. She's always been controlling, but I accepted it because that's just who she is. But watching her today, seeing how quickly she was ready to believe the worst about you, how conditional her love for our baby seemed to be, it made me realize I don't want our daughter growing up under that kind of pressure. I leaned against him, tears threatening. Thank you for standing up for us. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. It's what I should have been doing all along. And I promise you, Emma, from now on, you and our daughter come first. Always. We sat like that for a long time, holding each other as the afternoon light faded into evening. There was still so much to process, so much healing to do. But for the first time in weeks, I felt truly hopeful about our future. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and bacon wafting from the kitchen. I found Jack standing at the stove, spatula in hand, a determined expression on his face as he battled with slightly burned pancakes. I was going to surprise you with breakfast in bed, he admitted sheepishly when he noticed me watching from the doorway. But it turns out pancakes are trickier than they look on cooking shows. My heart swelled with affection. It's perfect just like this. We ate together at the kitchen island, talking easily about mundane things, work projects, an upcoming movie we wanted to see, whether the spare bedroom had enough natural light for a nursery. It felt wonderfully, blessedly normal. I was thinking, Jack said as he cleared our plates, maybe we should get away for a weekend, just the two of us before the baby comes. Somewhere quiet where we can talk and reconnect. The suggestion took me by surprise. Jack had never been one to spontaneously plan getaways. That had always been my department. I'd love that. Where were you thinking? There's a small bed and breakfast up the coast that Daniel mentioned once. Ocean views, private beach access. Might be nice to breathe some sea air. I smiled, touched by his effort. That sounds wonderful. He hesitated, then added, and maybe while we're there we could talk about names, real ones, that we both actually like? I'd like that, I said softly. The peaceful moment was interrupted by Jack's phone buzzing on the counter. He glanced at it, his expression darkening slightly. It's my mother. Again. You don't have to answer. I know, he said, silencing the call. But she'll keep trying until I do. I should probably talk to her, set some clearer boundaries. I nodded, understanding the delicate balance he was trying to maintain. Do what you need to do. I trust you. He looked at me then, his expression intensely grateful. Those words mean more to me than you know. After breakfast, Jack retreated to his home office to call Patricia back while I took a shower, deliberately giving him privacy for the conversation. When I emerged, dressed and ready for the day, he was sitting on the edge of our bed, looking troubled. Everything okay? I asked cautiously. He sighed. Mom's organizing a family dinner for this weekend, supposedly to clear the air after all the misunderstandings we've had recently. And by clear the air, she means reassert control. I guessed. Jack nodded grimly. Probably. I told her we'd think about it, but I'm not sure I want to subject you to another Wilson family interrogation so soon. I sat beside him, considering our options. Maybe we should go. Show them we're united. It might be better than avoiding the issue and giving Patricia time to spin her own narrative to the rest of the family. You'd be willing to face them? Jack looked surprised. After everything? They're your family, Jack, which makes them mine too, for better or worse. I managed a small smile. Besides, I've survived worse these past few weeks. I think I can handle dinner with the Wilsons. He pulled me into a tight hug. You're the strongest person I know, Emma Wilson, and I don't deserve you. The family dinner was scheduled for Saturday evening at the Wilson home. As we drove there, I found myself oddly calm, perhaps because my expectations were so low, or perhaps because Jack's hand held mine firmly the entire journey. Remember, he said as we turned onto the tree-lined drive leading to his parents' house, we're in this together. If it gets too uncomfortable, just signal me and we'll leave. I squeezed his hand gratefully. I will, but let's try to keep the peace if we can. The Wilsons were already gathered in the formal living room when we arrived, Patricia and Robert holding court from their matching armchairs, Vanessa perched on the sofa beside Daniel and his wife Olivia, who looked as uncomfortable as I usually felt at these gatherings. Jack! Emma! Robert stood to greet us, his welcome seemingly genuine. Good to see you both. How's our granddaughter doing? I instinctively placed a hand on my now visible bump. She's doing well, very active, especially at night. A night. Owl, like her father, Robert chuckled. Jack never could sleep through the night as a baby. Patricia approached, air-kissing my cheek with practiced precision. Emma, you're positively glowing. Pregnancy suits you. The compliment caught me off guard, especially given our last interaction. Thank you, Patricia. Come, sit down, she urged, guiding us toward the seating area. Vanessa has some exciting news to share. Vanessa, Jack's younger sister, flashed a bright smile and extended her left hand, where a sizable diamond sparkled on her ring finger. Thomas proposed last night. We're getting married in June. A chorus of congratulations filled the room. I felt a genuine smile spread across my face, happy to focus on someone else's news for a change. That's wonderful, Vanessa. Have you set a date yet? June 18th, she replied. At St. Andrews, of course. Wilson women have been getting married there for generations. The familiar refrain of Wilson tradition made me tense slightly, but I maintained my smile. It's a beautiful church. Patricia beamed at her daughter. We've already spoken to Reverend Marshall about the ceremony, and of course the reception will be at the garden terrace in the Wilson room. We've had it booked since Vanessa and Thomas started dating. Of course they had. Nothing was left to chance in the Wilson family timeline. That's only 2 months after my due date, I observed, cutting it close for being in a wedding party. Vanessa waved a dismissive hand. Oh, don't worry. I wasn't planning to ask you to be a bridesmaid. Given your condition, I thought you'd prefer to just attend as a guest. The casual exclusion stung more than it should have. Right. Of course. Jack's hand found mine, squeezing gently. Our daughter will be the youngest attendee at her aunt's wedding, he said, his tone light but with an undercurrent of warning. Dinner was served shortly after, a formal affair with Robert at the head of the table, Patricia at the foot, and the rest of us arranged along the sides. The conversation flowed around wedding plans and corporate acquisitions, Wilson family strongholds, in which I had little input. So, Emma, Daniel's wife Olivia said during a lull, have you and Jack decided on a name for the baby yet? I felt the atmosphere shift imperceptibly as Patricia's attention zeroed in on us. We're still discussing options, Jack answered before I could, but we're leaning towards something modern, unique to our branch of the family. Patricia set down her wine glass with deliberate care. Jack mentioned you're not considering family names. That's quite a departure from tradition. Robert looked surprised. No family names? But Jack, your great-grandfather William built this house. Your grandfather William established the family business. Surely you want to honor that legacy. We honor The legacy by living well and raising our daughter with the values that matter, Jack replied evenly. Her name doesn't define her connection to the family. And what about you, Emma? Patricia asked, her gaze sharp. No family names from your side you'd like to include? It was a calculated question, designed to put me in an impossible position. If I said no, I'd be dismissing my own heritage. If I said yes, I'd be contradicting our stance against family names. Actually, I said carefully, my grandmother's name was Lily. It's not a name we're considering directly, but it has inspired one of the options on our list. Jack looked at me curiously. We hadn't actually discussed names yet, but played along seamlessly. We're thinking of floral-inspired names, something natural and beautiful. Patricia's lips pursed in disapproval. Floral names are rather common, don't you think? Elizabeth has such a regal quality to it, a name with substance and history. We want our daughter to write her own history, I replied, surprised by my own boldness. Not feel burdened by the weight of others' expectations. A tense silence descended on the table. Vanessa glanced between me and Patricia, clearly expecting an explosion. Daniel suddenly became very interested in his roast beef. Robert cleared his throat awkwardly. Then Olivia, who had been quiet most of the evening, spoke up. I think that's lovely. A name should be a gift, not an obligation. I shot her a grateful look, recognizing an unexpected ally. Well, Patricia said with a tight smile, I suppose every generation believes they know better than the last. It's your child, after all. The concession, however reluctantly given, felt like a victory. Jack's hand found mine under the table, a silent acknowledgement of the moment. The rest of dinner passed with less tension, conversation drifting to safer topics. As we prepared to leave, Robert pulled Jack aside for a private word while Patricia insisted on showing me some baby photos of Jack in the study. He was such a beautiful baby, she said, handing me a leather-bound album. Perfect in every way. The photos showed a chubby-cheeked infant with Jack's unmistakable eyes, surrounded by the same Wilson family luxury that persisted to this day. He was a handful even then, Patricia continued, her voice softening with genuine affection. Strong-willed, determined. I see that same strength in you, Emma. I looked up, startled by what sounded almost like a compliment. We may not always agree, she went on, carefully turning a page in the album, but I respect your dedication to Jack and to your child. The way you stood by your truth, even when the evidence seemed against you. That's a quality I value. Thank you, I said, uncertain how to navigate this unexpected thaw. That means a lot. Patricia closed the album, her expression becoming more businesslike again. I won't pretend I'm not disappointed about the name. Traditions matter in this family, but I also know that fighting you on this will only push Jack further away. And that's not what I want. The calculated honesty was so typically Patricia, practical even in concession, that I had to suppress a smile. I appreciate your understanding. She fixed me with a penetrating look. Just promise me one thing, Emma. Whatever name you choose, make sure it's one she can carry with pride. A name is the first gift we give our children. It should reflect the greatness we see in them. For the first time, I glimpsed something beyond Patricia's controlling facade. A mother who, in her own flawed way, wanted the best for her son and grandchild. I promise. Our daughter's name will be one we're all proud of. When Jack and I left the Wilson house that night, I felt strangely lighter, as if some of the tension that had defined my relationship with his family had begun to shift. Not dramatically, not completely, but enough to glimpse a possible future where we could coexist without constant struggle. That went better than expected, Jack said as we drove home. Though I'm dying to know what my mother said to you in the study. I smiled, watching the familiar streets of Riverside pass by. She showed me your baby pictures. You were very cute, for the record. And? He prompted, knowing there must have been more to the conversation. And she basically conceded on the name issue, though I think it physically pained her to do so. Jack nearly swerved the car in surprise. My mother? Conceded? Are we talking about the same Patricia Wilson? I laughed at his shocked expression. She's still hoping we'll change our minds, I'm sure. But she's smart enough to know that pushing too hard will only backfire. Wow. Jack shook his head, in amazement. Maybe there's hope for family harmony after all. Maybe, I agreed, though I wouldn't count on miracle transformations. She's still Patricia. Speaking of names, he said, glancing at me curiously. Lily? Is that really your grandmother's name? I nodded. My mother's mother. She died when I was little, but I remember her garden. It was full of lilies. She used to let me help her tend them. I like it, Jack said thoughtfully. Not Lily directly, but something inspired by it. It feels like a good direction. The warm feeling in my chest expanded. After weeks of chaos and pain, we were finally having the conversations we should have been having all along, about our daughter, our future, our family on our own terms. When we arrived home, Jack surprised me by coming around to open my car door, an old-fashioned courtesy he rarely remembered. As I stepped out, he didn't release my hand. Emma, he said, his expression suddenly serious in the darkness. I want you to know something. What is it? I asked, a flicker of concern rising at his tone. These past weeks, the doubt, the separation, even tonight with my family, they've made me realize how much I've taken for granted. How I've let others influence decisions that should have been ours alone. I squeezed his hand encouragingly. We're finding our way now. Yes, he agreed, but I need you to hear this. From now on, you and our daughter come first, before my parents, before work, before anything. I promise you that. The sincerity in his voice brought tears to my eyes. That goes both ways, you know. We're a team, the three of us. Jack placed his hand gently on my growing belly. The three of us, he echoed, our own little family. As we stood there, in our driveway, the evening stars emerging overhead, I felt a powerful sense of rightness settle over me. The road ahead wouldn't be perfectly smooth. Patricia would never fully relinquish her desire for control, and Jack's newfound backbone would be tested. But we were facing it together, stronger for having weathered the storm. Our daughter kicked against Jack's palm, as if adding her agreement to the family consensus. He laughed, the joy in his expression washing away the last traces of the doubt and pain that had marked his features for too long. I think she's casting her vote on the name debate, he said. I smiled, covering his hand with mine. Well, we should probably start listening to her opinion. I have a feeling she's going to be as strong-willed as her father. And as principled as her mother, Jack added softly. We walked into our home, hand in hand, leaving behind the shadow of uncertainty that had lingered over us. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be many, we would face them as a united front, a family defined not by tradition or expectation, but by love and the future we were building together. The coastal bed and breakfast exceeded all expectations. Perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, the charming Victorian house offered sweeping ocean views and a much-needed respite from the drama of the past month. Jack had managed to book us the best room, a corner suite with a private balcony, 4-poster bed, and a deep clawfoot tub that I immediately earmarked for a long, luxurious soak. This is perfect, I sighed, dropping my weekend bag and moving to the window. The October sky was clear, sunlight dancing across the waves below. Jack came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my expanding waistline. I thought we could walk down to the beach after lunch. The owner says there's a path that's not too steep. I leaned back against him, savoring the solid warmth of his body. That sounds wonderful. We spent the afternoon strolling along the shoreline, shoes in hand as the cold Pacific water lapped at our ankles. Jack kept a protective arm around me, steadying my increasingly unbalanced form whenever the shifting sand threatened my stability. At 26 weeks, my pregnancy was becoming more pronounced, my center of gravity shifting with my growing daughter. "Any regrets?" Jack asked suddenly as we paused to watch a pair of dolphins playing in the distance. "About what?" He made a vague gesture that seemed to encompass everything: me, him, the baby, our life together. Any of it. All of it. I considered the question seriously, thinking back over the tumultuous path that had led us here. "No," I said finally. "Even the hard parts brought us where we are now, and I wouldn't trade this for anything." Jack kissed my temple, his lips lingering against my skin. I still wake up sometimes thinking it was all a nightmare. The test results, moving out, doubting you. Then I remember it really happened, and I'm overcome with shame. I turned to face him, taking his hands in mine. "Jack, we have to let that go, both of us. What happened wasn't your fault or mine. It was just one of those bizarre twists of fate that no one could have predicted." "Chimerism," he said, shaking his head in lingering disbelief. "Dr. Patel says it's incredibly rare. Of all the medical conditions to have, I get the one that nearly destroys our marriage." "Or saves it," I countered. "Think about it. If this hadn't happened, would you have ever stood up to your mother the way you did? Would we be choosing our own path instead of following the Wilson family roadmap?" He considered this, watching the waves roll in and retreat. "Maybe not, at least not so decisively." "Then maybe it was exactly what we needed, a crisis that forced us to decide what really matters." Jack smiled, some of the tension leaving his expression. "When did you get so wise?" "Growing another human gives you perspective," I laughed, patting my belly. "Plus, I've had a lot of time to think about this." We continued our walk, talking about everything and nothing. Work projects, nursery colors, a funny story Sophia had told me about her disastrous date with a man who brought his mother along. It felt wonderfully normal, blissfully ordinary. By the time we headed back to the bed and breakfast, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. After dinner at a small seafood restaurant in the nearby town, we sat on our private balcony wrapped in blankets against the evening chill, a pot of herbal tea between us. "I think we should talk about names," Jack said, pouring me another cup. "For real this time, not just to appease my mother." I smiled, grateful for the opening. "I've been thinking about it a lot. Do you have any ideas?" He nodded, looking slightly sheepish. "I've actually been keeping a list on my phone. Nothing fancy, just names that caught my attention." "Let's hear it," I encouraged. Jack pulled out his phone and scrolled through his notes. "Remember, these are just ideas. Feel free to veto anything that doesn't feel right." I nodded, touched by his consideration. "Okay, here goes. Violet, rose, iris. Those are the flower-inspired ones. Then there's autumn, summer, April, seasonal names. I also liked Claire, Maya, Sophie, and Zoe." He glanced up. "Any of those stand out to you?" I considered the options, mentally trying each one with our last name. "I like Violet Wilson, and Iris has a nice ring to it too. From your second group, I think Autumn Wilson sounds lovely." "You're leaning toward the nature names," Jackie observed. "I think I am," I admitted. "There's something timeless about them, but they still feel fresh and unique." "What about you? Do you have favorites from your list?" Jack took a sip of his tea, looking thoughtful. "I'm drawn to Violet. It feels both classic and modern at the same time. And it's not common, but people still know how to spell it." "Violet," I repeated, testing the name. It's beautiful, and we could call her Vi for short. Violet Wilson, Jack said, a smile spreading across his face. I think that might be our front runner. What about a middle name? I asked. Any thoughts there? Jack hesitated, and I could see him weighing his words carefully. I know we said no family names, but what about something that honors your side of the family without being directly named after someone? Since my family has been so prominent in our lives, it might be nice to balance things a bit. The thoughtfulness of his suggestion caught me off guard. That's actually a wonderful idea. What did you have in mind? Your mother's from Shanghai, right? Maybe something that acknowledges that heritage? I felt a surprising swell of emotion at his suggestion. My Chinese heritage had always been important to me, but the Wilsons had a way of making everything about their lineage, their traditions. Jack's proposal to incorporate my cultural background into our daughter's name felt like a meaningful step toward balance. There's a Chinese name I've always loved, May. It means beautiful or plum blossom, depending on the character used. Violet May Wilson. Jack tested the name, his expression brightening. It flows really well. Violet May Wilson. I love it. As the name settled between us, I felt a deep sense of rightness. This was our daughter's name, not chosen to appease family traditions or fulfill anyone's expectations, but selected with love and intention by her parents. Should we keep brainstorming or do we think we have it? Jack asked. I smiled, placing a hand on my stomach where our daughter, Violet, was doing what felt like somersaults. I think Violet May is perfect. She seems to agree too. She's dancing around in there. Jack reached over to feel the movement, his face alight with wonder. Hello, Violet, he whispered. We can't wait to meet you. The rest of the weekend passed in a bubble of reconnection. We explored the small coastal town, browsed quaint shops for baby items, and spent long evenings talking about our hopes for our daughter's future. By the time we headed home on Sunday afternoon, I felt more connected to Jack than I had in months, possibly ever. As we approached Riverside, reality began to intrude on our peaceful interlude. Jack's phone, which had been blessedly silent for most of the weekend, pinged with a series of incoming messages. Everything okay? I asked, noticing his frown as he glanced at the screen. It's Vanessa, he sighed. Apparently, Mom's been on a rampage all weekend about the baby shower. She's planning some elaborate event at the country club for next month and is upset that we haven't approved her guest list. I suppressed a groan. We never asked her to plan a shower in the first place. I know, I'll handle it, Jack promised, putting his phone away without responding. Our weekend isn't over until we're home. But the spell had been broken. The Wilson family drama already seeping back into our lives. I tried to hold on to the peaceful feeling from our getaway, reminding myself that we were stronger now, better equipped to handle Patricia's manipulations. When we arrived home, a large package sat on our porch, a delivery from an upscale baby boutique with a card in Patricia's distinctive handwriting. For my granddaughter, family heirlooms are meant to be passed down. With love, Grandmother Wilson. Inside was an antique silver brush and comb set, engraved with the Wilson crest, and a handmade christening gown of delicate lace and satin. Both were beautiful, undoubtedly expensive, and laden with expectations we had explicitly rejected. She doesn't give up easily, does she? I remarked, running my fingers over the fine lace of the gown. Jack shook his head, a mix of exasperation and resignation on his face. It's her way of laying claim to Violet. These aren't just gifts, they're statements about her role in our daughter's life. What should we do? Send them back? He considered this, weighing the potential fallout. No, that would just escalate things. Let's accept them graciously, but maintain our boundaries where it really matters. I nodded, though a part of me felt like we were already compromising the firm stance we'd taken at the Wilson family dinner. This was the challenge of dealing with Patricia, knowing which battles were worth fighting and which ones were better to concede. The next morning, I returned to work at Clearview Analytics, diving back into the marketing campaign I'd been developing before our weekend away. Around 11, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Lunch today? We need to discuss the baby shower. 12:30 at Harborview?" I stared at the message, caught off guard by the direct invitation. Patricia rarely sought me out one-on-one, preferring to work through Jack or orchestrate family gatherings where she controlled the environment. A private lunch seemed out of character. After a moment's deliberation, I responded, "Can't do lunch today? Busy at work? But I could meet for coffee at Morning Brew around 4. By suggesting my regular coffee spot instead of Patricia's preferred upscale restaurant, I was making a small claim for control. The response came quickly. 4 p.m. works. See you then." I texted Jack to let him know about the meeting, not wanting him to be blindsided if Patricia mentioned it later. "Want me to come?" he offered immediately. "I think I need to handle this one myself," I replied, "but thanks for offering." "Good luck. Remember, we make the decisions about Violet, not my mother." Violet. The name still felt new and special between us, a secret not yet shared with the world. I touched my belly, making a silent promise to our daughter that I would stand firm against the tide of Wilson expectations. Morning Brew was busy when I arrived, the after-work crowd filling most of the tables. I spotted Patricia immediately, her perfectly coiffed silver hair and designer outfit standing out among the casually dressed professionals and college students who typically frequented the place. "Emma, dear," she greeted me, rising slightly as I approached. "What an interesting little cafe. I ordered you herbal tea. Caffeine isn't good for the baby." I bit back the retort that I was well aware of pregnancy dietary guidelines and could make my own decisions. "Thank you, Patricia. How are you?" "Busy as always. Robert and I are hosting the hospital charity gala next week, and Vanessa's engagement party needs finalizing. But family comes first, which is why I wanted to discuss the baby shower." I took a cautious sip of the tea she'd ordered, a bland chamomile blend that was nothing like the spiced chai I would have chosen for myself. Jack and I were actually thinking of something small, just close friends and family. Patricia waved dismissively. "Nonsense. This is the first Wilson grandchild. We need to mark the occasion properly. I've reserved the West Ballroom at Riverside Country Club for November 12th. The guest list is already at 68, and that's just family and close connections." I nearly choked on my tea. 68 people? "Patricia, that's not a baby shower, that's a society event. I don't even know that many people in Riverside." "You don't need to know them, dear. They're people who matter to the Wilson family. Business, associates, social connections. People who have known Jack since he was a boy. But a baby shower is supposed to be intimate, personal. It's about celebrating the baby with people who will be part of her life." Patricia's smile tightened. "In some circles, perhaps, but in our world, these occasions serve a broader purpose. They establish the child's place in society, affirm important connections, fulfill social obligations." I took a deep breath, reminding myself to choose my battles carefully. I understand that's the Wilson way, but it's not what Jack and I want for our daughter. We're trying to create our own traditions, remember? "Emma," Patricia said, her voice taking on the tone one might use with a stubborn child. "I'm not sure you fully appreciate what it means to be part of this family. The Wilson name opens doors, creates opportunities. But it also comes with certain responsibilities, certain expectations." "And who sets those expectations?" I challenged, surprising myself with my directness. "Why should traditions that were established generations ago dictate how we raise our child today?" Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Tradition provides structure, continuity. It connects us to something larger than ourselves. I'm not against tradition, I clarified. But I believe traditions should serve the family, not the other way around. They should evolve as the family evolves. We stared at each other across the table, two women with fundamentally different worldviews engaged in a quiet power struggle over an unborn child. "You've changed, Jack," Patricia said finally, her voice softer but no less intense. "He used to understand his place in the family, his responsibilities." "I haven't changed him," I countered. "I've simply supported him in finding his own voice. There's a difference." Patricia took a deliberate sip of her tea, studying me over the rim of her cup. "You're more formidable than I initially gave you credit for, Emma. I can see why my son is so taken with you." The statement hovered somewhere between compliment and accusation. I decided to take it as the former. "Thank you. I care deeply about Jack and our family, including you and Robert. I'm not trying to cut you out of Violet's life. I just want us to find a balance that respects everyone's needs and boundaries." "Violet?" Patricia's eyebrows rose sharply. "You've chosen a name already?" I hadn't meant to reveal that detail yet, but there was no taking it back now. "Yes. Violet May Wilson. We decided this weekend." To my surprise, Patricia didn't immediately object or push for Elizabeth Patricia. Instead, she seemed to be testing the name mentally, her head tilted, slightly as if listening to how it sounded. "Violet," she repeated. "It's not a Wilson name." "No," I agreed. "It's her name, her own." "And May? That's Chinese?" I nodded. "It means beautiful or plum blossom, depending on the character. It's a nod to my heritage." Patricia was quiet for a moment, absorbing this information. "Well," she said finally, "it's certainly distinctive. Violet May Wilson." It wasn't approval exactly, but it wasn't outright rejection either. I decided to count it as progress. "About the baby." "Shower," I said, bringing us back to the original topic. "What if we compromise? You can host a larger reception after Violet is born, a proper introduction to the Wilson social circle. But for the shower itself, I'd really prefer something smaller, more intimate." Patricia considered this proposal, clearly weighing the social implications. "I suppose we could do both. A private shower for your close friends and immediate family, and then a larger reception once the baby arrives." "That sounds perfect," I said, genuinely relieved by her flexibility. "Thank you for understanding." She reached across the table to pat my hand in a rare gesture of physical affection. "You're carrying my granddaughter, Emma. We may have our differences, but never doubt that I want the best for her, and for you." The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard, making me wonder if perhaps I'd been too quick to cast Patricia as the villain in our family drama. Behind her controlling tendencies and rigid adherence to tradition was a woman who, in her own way, was trying to protect and provide for the people she loved. "I know you do," I said softly. "We all want what's best for Violet. We just might have different ideas about what that looks like." Patricia nodded, a flicker of understanding passing between us. "Different, yes, but perhaps not as incompatible as we've been making them." As our conversation wound down, I felt a shift in our dynamic. Not a complete transformation, but a subtle realignment of expectations on both sides. Patricia would never fully abandon her belief in the Wilson way of doing things, but she seemed more willing to accommodate our wishes than I had anticipated. When I told Jack about the meeting later that evening, he seemed both impressed and slightly suspicious. "She just accepted Violet May? No argument about Elizabeth Patricia?" I shrugged, still surprised by it myself. She didn't exactly embrace it with open arms, but she didn't fight it either. And she agreed to the smaller shower. Jack looked thoughtful as he loaded dishes into the dishwasher. "That doesn't sound like my mother. She never gives in that easily." "Maybe she's finally accepting that things are changing," I suggested, though I shared his skepticism. Or maybe she's picking her battles. That's more likely, Jack said with a wry smile. Just be careful. When Mom appears to concede on something, she's usually planning her next move. His warning proved prophetic the very next day, when a large envelope arrived from Patricia's personal stationery designer. Inside were mock-ups for birth announcements, elegantly designed cards featuring the Wilson family crest and the name Elizabeth Patricia Wilson in flowing script. She had these made even after our conversation about Violet May? I asked incredulously, showing them to Jack when he got home from work. Jack examined the cards, his expression darkening. This is classic Mom. Agree to your face, then proceed. With her own plans anyway. What do we do? I thought we were making progress yesterday. He pulled out his phone with a sigh. I'll call her. This needs to stop now. I could hear Patricia's voice on the other end of the line, though not the specific words. Jack's responses, however, were clear and increasingly firm. Mom, we told Emma the name is Violet May. No, it's not up for discussion. I understand you've already ordered the cards, but that was premature. No, we're not going to change our minds. Yes, I know about the Wilson naming tradition, but as I've said repeatedly, we're starting our own traditions. As the conversation continued, Jack's patience visibly thinned. Finally, he put the phone on speaker and placed it on the counter between us. Just think you're being hasty, Patricia was saying. Elizabeth is a beautiful, classic name with family significance. This Violet name sounds like something from a gardening catalog. I felt my cheeks flush with anger, but Jack spoke before I could. Mom, I'm going to say this one more time, and I need you to really hear me. Our daughter's name is Violet May Wilson, not Elizabeth, not Patricia, not any other name you might prefer. This decision is final and not open to debate. If you can't accept that, then we may need to reconsider how involved you'll be in Violet's early life. There was a shocked silence on the other end of the line. Surely you don't mean that, Patricia finally said, her voice uncharacteristically small. I do, Jack replied, his tone gentler but still firm. I love you, Mom. I want you to be a part of Violet's life. But that relationship has to be based on respect. Respect for our decisions as her parents. Respect for Emma as my wife and Violet's mother. Respect for the family we're creating. Another long pause. I see, Patricia said. At last. Well, I suppose I'll have to cancel the birth announcement order. That would be best, Jack agreed. Maybe we can look at designs together next week, ones that feature the name Violet May. After a few more exchanges, the call ended. Jack looked drained but resolute as he set his phone down. Do you think she finally got the message? I asked, leaning against the counter beside him. For now, he sighed. The birth announcement thing was a test, seeing if we'd cave if presented with a fait accompli. When that didn't work, she'll try something else. It feels like a never-ending battle, I admitted. Every time I think we're making progress, we end up right back where we started. Jack pulled me into a gentle embrace. Not exactly where we started. Each time the boundaries get a little clearer, a little firmer. It's just going to take time. I rested my head against his chest, taking comfort in his steady heartbeat. I just want us to be a normal family, focused on preparing for our baby without all this drama. Wilson family normal was never going to be most people's normal, Jack said with a rueful laugh. But we're finding our way to our own version of it. And Violet will be better off for it, growing up with parents who stand their ground and grandparents who, eventually, learn to respect that. I hoped he was right. As Violet's birth drew closer, the need to establish clear boundaries with the Wilsons felt increasingly urgent. Our daughter deserved to enter a world where her identity wasn't a battleground between competing family visions. That night, as we worked on the nursery, a project we'd been tackling in stages as energy and time allowed, I found myself imagining Violet's arrival with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. "Do you think your mother will try to be in the delivery room?" I asked, only half joking as I arranged stuffed animals in the crib. Jack looked up from assembling a bookshelf, his expression horrified. "Absolutely not. That's one line even she wouldn't cross." "Don't be so sure," I warned. "Remember when she said it was Wilson tradition for grandmothers to attend the first ultrasound? Who knows what other traditions she might invent between now and February." Jack set down his screwdriver, looking thoughtful. "Maybe we should be more proactive about this. Set expectations now about the birth, the first few weeks afterward, visitors, all of it. Like a birth plan but for family management?" I suggested. "Exactly. We tell everyone, not just my parents, but your mom too, and our friends. Exactly. What we want and don't want. No ambiguity, no room for creative interpretation." The idea had merit. We could present it as being on doctor's orders. "The medical team recommends limited visitors for the first 2 weeks" sounds better than "we don't want Patricia hovering over us while we figure out breastfeeding." Jack laughed. "Brilliant. Dr. Chen would probably back us up on that anyway." As we continued working on the nursery, the conversation shifted to more practical aspects of Violet's arrival. Hospital bags, pediatrician selection, infant care classes. It felt good to focus on these concrete preparations, to imagine our life with Violet beyond the current family tensions. Later, as we lay in bed, Jack's hand resting protectively on my growing belly, I found myself thinking about the strange journey that had brought us to this point. The gender reveal that had turned into a paternity revelation, the painful separation, the discovery of Jack's chimerism, the ongoing battle with Patricia over names and traditions. It all seemed like something from a dramatic movie rather than our actual lives. "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked, noticing my contemplative expression. "Just everything. How different things are now from what we expected when we first found out I was pregnant." He nodded, his fingers making gentle circles on my stomach. "Better or worse?" I considered the question carefully. Different. Harder. In some ways, but better in others. I feel like we know each other more deeply now, like we've been tested and come through stronger. "We have," Jack agreed, "and we'll keep getting stronger. For Violet." As if responding to her name, our daughter gave a forceful kick right against Jack's hand. We both laughed, the simple joy of that moment washing away the day's tensions. "She's going to be a fighter," I said, "with a name she chose for herself and parents who will teach her to stand her ground." Jack smiled, his eyes bright with love and anticipation. "The world better watch out for Violet May Wilson." Indeed, it should, I thought as I drifted toward sleep. With Wilson determination and Chen resilience flowing through her veins, our daughter was destined for greatness. Not the kind defined by family crests and social standing, but the kind measured in courage, compassion, and the strength to chart her own path. The weeks leading up to my due date flew by in a blur of preparation and anticipation. The nursery was finished, a peaceful space in soft greens and yellows with watercolor paintings of wildflowers I'd done myself during a nesting-induced creative surge. Our hospital bags were packed, birth plan finalized, and pediatricians selected. Even the smaller, more intimate baby shower had gone surprisingly well, with Patricia behaving herself admirably, though the gleam in her eye suggested she was merely biding her time until the larger baby reception she still planned to host. After Violet's arrival, January brought unseasonably cold weather to Riverside, with frost patterns decorating our windows each morning and weather forecasters warning of possible snow, a rarity in our typically mild climate. As my February due date approached, I found myself increasingly uncomfortable, my body seemingly stretched to its absolute limit. "I don't think I can get any bigger," I complained to Jack one evening as I struggled to find a comfortable position on the couch. "She's running out of room in there." Jack smiled sympathetically, lifting my swollen feet onto his lap and beginning to massage them gently. "Dr. Chen said everything looks perfect at your last appointment, right on schedule." I groaned as his thumbs worked magic on my aching arches. Easy for her to say. She's not carrying a tiny kickboxer who practices her routines at 3 a.m. "Just a few more weeks," Jack reminded me. "Then we get to meet her." The thought brought a smile to my face despite my discomfort. After everything we'd been through, the reality of holding our daughter in our arms was tantalizingly close. Our peaceful evening was interrupted by Jack's phone ringing, Patricia's ringtone. He sighed but answered, putting it on speaker as had become our habit for family calls. "Jack, darling," Patricia's voice filled our living room. "I've just heard the most wonderful news. The Prestons have agreed to host Violet's christening reception at their estate. Isn't that marvelous?" Jack and I exchanged alarmed glances. We hadn't discussed christening plans with anyone, let alone arranged for the socially prominent Preston family to host a reception. "Mom," Jack began carefully, "we haven't decided about a christening yet. Violet isn't even born." There was a brief pause. "Well, of course she'll be christened. All Wilson children are baptized at St. Andrew's. It's tradition." "We're still discussing our approach to religious ceremonies," Jack replied, his tone firm but gentle. "When we make a decision, we'll let you know." I could practically hear Patricia's disapproval through the phone. "This isn't something that requires discussion, Jack. It's simply what's done. I've already spoken with Reverend Marshall about dates in April." Jack's expression hardened. "Mom, you need to cancel those conversations immediately. Emma and I will decide if, when, and where Violet participates in any religious ceremonies. This isn't negotiable. But the Prestons, please call them and explain that you spoke prematurely," Jack interrupted. "We appreciate your enthusiasm, but we need to make these decisions ourselves." After a few more tense exchanges, Patricia reluctantly agreed to postpone the christening plans. When the call ended, Jack looked drained. "I'm sorry about that," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I should have anticipated she'd try. Something like this." I shook my head, placing a hand on my belly where Violet was performing what felt like somersaults. "We can't anticipate every move she'll make. We just need to stay united in our responses." "You're right," Jack agreed, his expression softening as he watched me rub my stomach. "Is she active tonight?" "Very. Here, feel." I guided his hand to where Violet was pushing against my ribs. "I think she's running out of room in there." Jack's face lit up with wonder as he felt our daughter's movements. No matter how many times he experienced it, his joy never diminished. "Maybe she's eager to meet us. Or she's protesting her grandmother's presumptuous christening plans," I joked. Jack laughed, the tension from the call with Patricia dissipating. "Either way, she's definitely going to be strong-willed. With parents like us and grandparents, like yours, she doesn't stand a chance of being anything else." As January progressed, my discomfort increased proportionally with Violet's growth. Sleep became elusive, with no position comfortable for more than a few minutes. My feet and ankles swelled dramatically, and Braxton Hicks contractions, practice contractions, Dr. Chen assured me, became more frequent and intense. At my 38-week appointment, Dr. Chen examined me with her usual thorough care. "Everything looks good, Emma. Baby's head is engaged in the pelvis, which is exactly what we want to see at this stage." "Any chance she'll come early?" I asked hopefully. "I'm not sure how much bigger I can get." Dr. Chen smiled sympathetically. "First babies often come late, actually, but you never know. She'll arrive when she's ready." As if determined to prove the doctor wrong, my water broke just 3 days later, at the most inconvenient possible moment, during a dinner at the Wilson family home that Patricia had insisted was just a casual Sunday meal, but which had somehow evolved into a gathering of extended family and close friends. I was in the middle of a conversation with Olivia, Daniel's wife, when I felt the unmistakable gush of fluid. My gasp drew immediate attention from everyone nearby. "Emma? What's wrong?" Jack was at my side instantly, concern etched on his face. "My water just broke," I whispered, mortification washing over me as I realized what had happened. "Right here in your mother's dining room." Jack's eyes widened, a mix of panic and excitement replacing his concern. "The baby's coming? Now?" Before I could respond, a contraction hit, stronger than any Braxton Hicks I'd experienced, stealing my breath and making me clutch Jack's arm for support. "What's happening?" Patricia demanded, making her way toward us through the gathered guests. "Emma, are you ill?" "Her water broke," Jack explained, his voice rising with excitement. "The baby's coming." A hush fell over the room, followed immediately by a flurry of activity. Robert was calling for someone to bring the car around. Vanessa was frantically searching for my purse. Daniel was on the phone with the hospital. And Patricia, surprisingly, was the calmest of all, guiding me to a chair and ordering one of the household staff to bring towels. "Deep breaths, Emma," she instructed, her usual imperious tone replaced by something almost gentle. "Jack, call Dr. Chen and let her know you're on your way to the hospital. Robert, make sure the car is warmed up. It's freezing outside." I stared at her in surprise, unused to seeing this competent, practical side of my mother-in-law. "This isn't my first rodeo, dear," she said, correctly interpreting my expression. "I've been through this myself twice." Another contraction gripped me, stronger than the first, and I gripped the arms of the chair, trying to remember the breathing techniques from our childbirth classes. "They're coming quite close together," Patricia observed. "How long have you been having contractions?" "I've had back pain all day," I admitted, but I thought it was just normal discomfort. Patricia nodded knowingly. "Back labor. I had that with Jack. Didn't realize I was in labor until my water broke at a charity luncheon." This glimpse of Patricia as a young mother, sharing my experience, rather than dictating it, momentarily bridged the gap between us. For the first time, I saw her not as the formidable Wilson matriarch, but simply as a woman who had once been where I was now. Jack returned, phone in hand. "Dr. Chen says to head to the hospital now. She'll meet us there." The journey from the Wilson home to Riverside Community Hospital was a blur of increasing contractions and Jack's nervous encouragement. By the time we arrived, the contractions were coming every 4 minutes, each one more intense than the last. The labor and delivery unit was surprisingly quiet for a Sunday evening. A nurse named Maya greeted us with calm efficiency, checking my vital signs and Violet's heart rate, while another nurse prepared the delivery room. "You're moving along quickly for a first baby," Maya observed after checking my dilation. "Already 6 centimeters." Dr. Chen arrived as I was being settled into the delivery room, her presence immediately reassuring. "Looks like Violet is eager to meet her parents," she said with a smile after examining me. "You're progressing rapidly. How are you feeling about pain management?" I had planned to try for an unmedicated birth, but the intensity of the contractions was making me reconsider. "I'm not sure I can do this without something," I admitted, between carefully controlled breaths. "There's no medal for suffering," Dr. Chen said kindly. "We can start with an IV pain medication to take the edge off and see how you feel. The anesthesiologist is available for an epidural if you decide you want one." I nodded gratefully, surrendering to her guidance. Jack stood by my side, holding my hand and wiping my forehead with a cool cloth, his presence steady despite the anxiety I could see in his eyes. The next few hours passed in a haze of pain, determination, and increasingly powerful contractions. The IV medication helped initially, but as labor intensified, I opted for the epidural, the relief it brought allowing me to rest briefly before the final stage began. "You're fully dilated," Dr. Chen announced after checking me around midnight. "It's time to start pushing." The pushing phase was the most physically demanding experience of my life, exhausting, intense, and seemingly endless. Jack counted through each push, his voice hoarse with emotion and encouragement. Dr. Chen remained calmly directive, guiding me through the process with professional expertise mixed with personal warmth. "I can see her head," Jack gasped at one point, his eyes filled with wonder. "Emma, she has hair." That visualization gave me renewed strength for the final pushes. With Dr. Chen's guidance and Jack's support, I gave one last monumental effort, and suddenly, miraculously, our daughter slipped into the world at 1:42 a.m. on a cold January morning, nearly 2 weeks before her due date. Her cry, strong and indignant, filled the room, and Dr. Chen placed her immediately on my chest, her tiny body warm and squirming against my skin. "Hello, Violet," I whispered, tears streaming down my face as I took in her perfect features. A button nose, rosebud, mouth and dark hair plastered to her head. "We've been waiting for you." Jack leaned down to kiss my forehead, his own tears falling freely. "She's perfect," he murmured, gently touching Violet's tiny hand. "Absolutely perfect." In that moment, the long journey to this point, the tension, with Patricia, the DNA test drama, all of it, faded into insignificance. Nothing mattered except this tiny human who had already claimed our hearts completely. The first few hours after Violet's birth passed in a blur of skin-to-skin bonding, initial nursing attempts, and the basic newborn assessments. Jack never left our side, alternating between staring in awe at our daughter and checking on my comfort and needs. By mid-morning, we had been moved to a recovery room, and I was dozing lightly with Violet asleep on my chest when a soft knock at the door announced our first visitors. "Is it okay if my parents come in?" Jack asked quietly. "They've been in the waiting room all night." I nodded, adjusting my position slightly and making sure Violet and I were presentably covered. "Of course." Patricia and Robert entered. Tentatively, their usual commanding presence subdued in the hushed atmosphere of the hospital room, Patricia's eyes immediately fixed on the small bundle resting on my chest, her expression softening in a way I'd rarely seen. "Emma, Jack," Robert said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Congratulations." Patricia approached the bed slowly, almost reverently. "May I see her?" she asked, uncharacteristic uncertainty in her voice. I carefully adjusted Violet so her face was visible. "Meet your granddaughter, Violet May Wilson." Patricia's breath caught as she took in Violet's features. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "She looks like Jack did as a newborn." "Would you like to hold her?" I offered, surprising myself with the gesture. Patricia's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" I nodded, and Jack carefully lifted Violet from my chest, transferring her to Patricia's waiting arms. The transformation in my mother-in-law was immediate and profound. Her usual rigid posture melted away as she cradled her granddaughter, murmuring soft words of welcome. "Hello, little one," she cooed, a smile I'd never seen before spreading across her face. "I'm your grandmother. We've been waiting for you for so long." Robert peered over his wife's shoulder, beaming with grandfatherly pride. "She's a Wilson, all right. Look at that determined little chin." "And her mother's eyes," Patricia added, glancing at me with unexpected warmth. "She's the perfect blend of both families." The acknowledgement of my contribution, both genetic and otherwise, to Violet's existence felt like a significant concession from Patricia. As I watched her with Violet, I saw a different side of her emerging, the loving grandmother beneath the controlling matriarch. "Have you called your mother yet?" Patricia asked, looking up from Violet's face. I nodded. She's on a flight from Shanghai now, should be here tomorrow. Good, Patricia said decisively. A girl needs her grandmother, both grandmothers, at a time like this. This inclusive comment, acknowledging my mother's importance alongside her own, was perhaps the most surprising development yet. Jack caught my eye, his expression reflecting my own amazement at his mother's transformation. The Wilsons didn't stay long, sensitive to my need for rest after the arduous birth. As Patricia reluctantly handed Violet back to me, she hesitated, then leaned down to press a light kiss to my forehead. "You did wonderfully, Emma," she said quietly. "Thank you for giving us this precious gift." After they left, Jack sat on the edge of the bed, shaking his head in wonder. I've never seen my mother like that before. "Grandchildren change people," I suggested, adjusting Violet as she began to root against my chest, her tiny mouth searching. Maybe this is the real Patricia Wilson, underneath all the social expectations and family traditions. Maybe, Jack agreed, watching as I helped Violet latch for feeding. Whatever it is, I'm grateful. Not just for how she was with Violet, but for what she said to you. She's never been that warm or appreciative. "Miracles happen," I said with a small smile, wincing slightly as Violet established a strong latch. Case in point, this little person who didn't exist 9 months ago and is now the center of our world. The next few days in the hospital passed in a newborn haze of feeding, diaper changes, medical checkups, and brief periods of rest. My mother arrived from Shanghai, tearfully meeting her granddaughter for the first time. To my surprise, she and Patricia established an almost immediate rapport, bonding over their shared grandmother status and comparing notes on their respective children's infancies. "Your mother is quite formidable," my mom commented after Patricia had left following a joint visit, "but she clearly adores Violet, and she respects you more than you realize." "What makes you say that?" I asked, curious about her perception. My mother smiled knowingly. "The way she defers to you about Violet's care, the way she asked permission before holding her. These are not the actions of a woman who sees herself as the authority. She recognizes that you and Jack are the parents, and she is following your lead." I hadn't considered it that way, but my mother's observation rang true. Throughout her visits, Patricia had been uncharacteristically careful to ask rather than tell, to offer rather than insist. It was a subtle but significant shift in dynamics. When we finally brought Violet home from the hospital, we found that Patricia had arranged for a week's worth of homemade meals to be delivered to our house, along with a discreet cleaning service, scheduled for twice weekly until you find your footing. There were no strings attached, no expectations of increased access or influence, just practical support offered without fanfare. The first few weeks of Violet's life passed in a blur of minimal sleep, constant feeding, and the steep learning curve of new parenthood. Jack took 3 weeks of paternity leave, throwing himself into diaper duty and midnight walks with the same determination he applied to his corporate projects. We established our own rhythms and routines, figuring out parenting our way, without interference. Patricia and Robert visited regularly but briefly, always calling ahead and bringing practical gifts, additional burp cloths when they noticed we were running low, a more ergonomic rocking chair when Patricia observed me struggling with the one. We had specialized bottles when Violet showed signs of colic. Never once did Patricia mention christenings or Wilson traditions or social obligations. One afternoon, about a month after Violet's birth, Patricia arrived alone for her usual brief visit. I was in the nursery, rocking a freshly fed and changed Violet when she appeared in the doorway. "Is this a good time?" she asked, uncharacteristically tentative. "Of course," I replied, gesturing for her to come in. "She just ate, so she's in a good mood." Patricia sat in the second rocking chair, the one she'd brought us, and watched as Violet made small cooing sounds, her eyes growing more alert by the day. "She's thriving," Patricia observed. You're doing a wonderful job with her, Emma." "Thank you," I said, surprised by the straightforward compliment. "We're still figuring things out, but I think we're getting there." Patricia nodded, then seemed to gather herself for something. "I wanted to speak with you privately, without Jack present. About how I behaved during your pregnancy." I looked at her in surprise. Patricia Wilson was not known for self-reflection or apologies. "I realize now that I was overbearing," she continued, the words clearly difficult for her. "The naming issue, the christening plans, the constant pressure about traditions and expectations. I convinced myself it was about honoring the Wilson legacy, but in truth, I was trying to control something that wasn't mine to control." I remained silent, giving her space to continue this unexpected confession. "Seeing you with Violet, watching how naturally you've taken to motherhood despite all my interference, it's made me reconsider many things." She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her slacks. "I didn't give you enough credit, Emma. I was so focused on ensuring Violet would be a proper Wilson that I failed to recognize what a gift your influence would be for her." "Patricia," I began, but she held up a hand, stopping me. "Please let me finish. This isn't easy for me." She took a deep breath. "When Jack first told us he was dating a marketing analyst from a non-traditional background, I was concerned. The Wilsons have always married within certain circles. Then when you became pregnant, I saw it as my responsibility to ensure the Wilson traditions would continue, regardless of your preferences." She looked directly at me, her expression more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. "I was wrong. And watching you these past weeks, your patience, your intuition with Violet, your strength after everything you went through, I've come to realize that you are exactly what this family needed. Not despite your differences from us, but because of them." I felt tears pricking at my eyes, moved by her sincerity and the clearly difficult admission. "Thank you, Patricia. That means more than you know." She nodded, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "I want you to know that moving forward, I intend to respect your boundaries as Violet's parents. No more presumptuous planning, no more pushing of traditions. I'll always be available for advice if you want it, but I won't offer it unsolicited." "I appreciate that," I said softly. "And I want you to know that despite our differences, I've never doubted that you love Violet and want what's best for her. We just had different ideas about what that looked like." Patricia smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her usually severe features. "Different, but perhaps complementary. She'll need both perspectives as she grows. The Wilson sense of history and connection, and your independence and fresh thinking." As if agreeing with her grandmother's assessment, Violet let out a happy gurgle, her tiny hands waving in the air. Patricia leaned closer, offering her finger for Violet to grasp. "She has a strong grip," Patricia observed proudly. "A determined little girl." With that combination of Wilson and Chen DNA, she was destined to be strong-willed, I laughed. Patricia's expression shifted slightly at the mention of DNA, and I realized we had never directly discussed the chimerism, revelation, with her. "That was quite an extraordinary situation," she said carefully. "The genetic testing confusion." I nodded, deciding to address it directly. "It was a difficult time for all of us, but in some ways, I'm grateful it happened. It forced Jack and me to confront issues that might have otherwise simmered beneath the surface for years." "It changed him," Patricia observed. "Made him more decisive, more willing to stand his ground, even against me." There was a note of respect in her voice. "It changed both of us," I acknowledged. "Made us stronger as a couple, clearer about our priorities." We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching Violet as she began to drift toward sleep, her eyelids growing heavy despite her valiant efforts to keep them open. "She fights sleep just like Jack did," Patricia said fondly. Never wanted to miss anything. As Violet finally surrendered to sleep, I carefully placed her in her crib. Patricia and I quietly left the nursery, making our way to the living room, where tea was already prepared, Jack's doing before he left for a quick grocery run.
There's something missing on it. It's you, Patricia's sweet little. It's slightly wondering if this would wear that you boundary respecting Patricia would visit here.
And the controlling matriarch would reemerge. I'd like to propose a compromise, she continued. Instead of the formal social event I originally envisioned, what if we host a more relaxed garden party at our home? Still larger than your intimate shower, but less. Wilson-centric. A true celebration of Violet with both families equally represented. The suggestion was so reasonable, so considerate of our preferences while still allowing Patricia to fulfill her desire to introduce Violet to their social circle, that I found myself nodding before I'd even fully processed it. That sounds lovely, I said sincerely, and much more our style than a formal reception. Patricia looked pleased. Wonderful. And perhaps your mother could help with the planning while she's here? I'd welcome her input on how to incorporate elements that honor her cultural traditions as well. This inclusion of my mother, treating her as an equal partner in the grandparent relationship rather than an outsider, felt like the final confirmation of Patricia's genuine change of heart. When Jack returned home to find his mother and me, laughing together over tea, his expression of stunned disbelief was comical enough to set us both off again. "What's happened here?" he asked, setting down the grocery bags and looking between us suspiciously. Have aliens replaced my mother and wife? Patricia rolled her eyes in a surprisingly playful gesture. Very funny, Jack. Emma and I were just discussing plans for Violet's garden party this spring. Garden party? He repeated, still looking confused by our evident rapport. Your mother's compromise solution, I explained. Less formal than her original plan, more inclusive of both families. Jack looked at his mother with new appreciation. That's really thoughtful, Mom. Thank you. Patricia waved away his thanks with an elegant gesture. It's the least I can do. After all, we're all on the same team now, Violet's team. As Patricia prepared to leave a short while later, she paused at the door. Oh, I almost forgot. I found this while going through some old family albums. She handed me a small, worn photograph. I thought you might like to have it. The photo showed a young woman in 1940s clothing, standing in a lush garden. She was holding a bouquet of purple flowers and smiling directly at the camera with unmistakable joy. That's Jack's great-grandmother on his father's side, Patricia explained. Her name was Violet. My breath caught as I looked from the photo to Patricia's face, searching for signs of manipulation or agenda. I found none, just a genuine desire to share a piece of family history that now had personal relevance. I had no idea there was a Violet in the family tree, Jack said, looking over my shoulder at the photo. She was Robert's grandmother, Patricia explained. Not a Wilson by birth, but by marriage. She tended the most beautiful flower gardens at the original family estate. The violet beds were her particular pride. The revelation that we had unwittingly chosen a name with a Wilson connection after all felt not like a victory for Patricia's side, but like a serendipitous bridge between our desire for originality and the family history that was, like it or not, part of Violet's heritage. Thank you for sharing this, I said, deeply touched by the gesture. It's a beautiful connection we didn't know existed. Patricia nodded, her expression serene. Some traditions find their own way of continuing, without any pushing from interfering grandmothers. As she left, Jack put his arm around me, both of us staring at the photograph of his great-great-grandmother Violet. Well, he said after a moment, that was unexpected. Which part? I asked with a small laugh. Your mother's complete personality transformation, or the fact that we accidentally chose a family name after all? Both, he admitted. Do you think she knew about this other Violet all along? That this was some elaborate long game? I considered the possibility, then shook my head. No, I think she's genuinely changed, or at least is trying to. The old Patricia would have triumphantly revealed this connection as proof that Wilson traditions should be followed. This Patricia shared it as a gift, not a victory. As if on cue, Violet's cry came through the baby monitor, announcing the end of her nap and her readiness to rejoin the family activities. I'll get her, Jackie offered, heading toward the nursery. I remained in the living room, looking at the photograph and reflecting on the strange, challenging, ultimately rewarding journey that had brought us to this point. From the shock of the gender-reveal DNA test to the discovery of Jack's chimerism, from battles over names and traditions to this new, tentative harmony, it had been a path none of us could have predicted. And at the center of it all was Violet, our daughter, named for a flower and, unknowingly, for an ancestor who had once tended gardens at the Wilson estate. Born of disputed DNA that turned out to be undeniably Jack's, carrying both our heritages in her tiny being, and already bringing about changes none of us had anticipated. As Jack returned with our now alert daughter, her dark eyes wide and curious, I felt a surge of gratitude for everything, even the difficult parts that had shaped our family story. What are you thinking about? Jack asked, settling beside me with Violet cradled securely in his arms. Just that sometimes the unexpected twists in life lead us exactly where we need to go, I replied, leaning against his shoulder and reaching out to stroke Violet's soft cheek. Even when they seem like disasters at the time. He nodded, understanding immediately what I meant. From DNA test drama to family harmony. Not the path I would have chosen, but I can't argue with where we ended up. Violet made a small cooing sound, as if adding her agreement to our assessment. Jack and I laughed, both leaning down to kiss her tiny forehead at the same time, our heads bumping gently in the process. In that moment, surrounded by love and the promise of a future we would write together, I knew that our family, unconventional as its beginning had been, was exactly as it was meant to be. Not defined by Wilson traditions or expectations, not limited by DNA tests or family names, but created through love, strengthened by challenges, and ready to write its own unique story. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.